All right, so what is an autopsy? An autopsy is the examination of the body of a dead person and is performed to determine the cause of death. So, forensic autopsies are autopsies with legal implications and are performed to determine if death was an accident, homicide, suicide, or a natural event. The word autopsy is derived from the Greek word autopsia, to see with one's own eyes. Autopsies are performed by pathologists, who are medical doctors who have received specialty training in the diagnosis of diseases by the examination of body fluids and tissues. So, who determines when an autopsy is performed? A physician cannot order an autopsy on a patient without the consent of the next of kin. A medical examiner can order an autopsy without the consent of the next of kin if death has occurred under suspicious circumstances. This could include accidental death or deaths that occur during medical procedures or operations. A medical examiner is usually a doctor who specializes in forensic medicine, which is the application of medical knowledge in the investigation of a crime. Sometimes medical examiners are also called forensic pathologists. In addition to examining the body, they can also use clues to determine how wounds were inflicted, such as those that occur from knives or bullets. So it takes a minimum of 13 years of education and training after high school to become a forensic pathologist. It also takes a strong stomach because it can be a gruesome, smelly, and disgusting job. You may also be required to testify in court over your findings. States or local governments often appoint a forensic pathologist to the job of medical examiner. So, how is an autopsy performed? There are a total of 6 different steps. So, for the first step, the autopsy begins with a complete external examination. The weight and height of the body are recorded, and identifying marks such as scars and tattoos also are recorded. Any external injuries are documented. 2. The internal examination begins with the creation of a Y incision from both shoulders joining over the sternum and continuing down to the pubic bone. The skin and underlying tissues are then separated to expose the rib cage and abdominal cavity. The organs of the thoracic and abdominal cavity are removed for further investigation. To remove the brain, an incision is made in the back of the skull from one ear to the other. The scalp is cut and separated from the underlying skull and pulled forward. The top of the skull is removed using a vibrating saw. The entire brain is then gently lifted out of the cranial vault through the top of the skull. The fourth step, the organs are first examined by the pathologist to note any changes visible with the naked eye. Examples of diseases that may produce changes readily recognizable in the organs include atherosclerosis and cirrhosis of the liver. Any other traumas are noted, such as stabbing wound or gunshot wound entry. The pathologist may determine that there are one or multiple causes of death based upon these observations. 5. After the organs are removed from the body, they can be further dissected to reveal any abnormalities, such as tumors. Samples of tissue may be viewed under a microscope or sent to a toxicologist for further investigation into the cause of death, particularly if it is not evident from the initial observations. And so finally, for the sixth final step, at the end of an autopsy, the organs are returned to the body and the incisions are sewn closed. In some cases, the organs may be preserved for future study or evidence. All right, so for your questions, so the first question asks to write a sentence to create a summary of the reading passage. So you're going to start with something that says the main idea of this article is to explain. So what do you guys think about the sentence? Main idea of the article is to explain the meaning and purpose of an autopsy, including those who are responsible for performing an autopsy. Do you guys agree with that sentence? Okay, awesome. So then it says the main idea is supported by several details like. So some details that you could discuss are medical examiners perform autopsies that involves, it's supposed to say 6 different steps. So we just talked about 6 different steps. That includes external examination, creation of a wide incision, removal of brain, and examination of organs. Because if you go back here, yeah, so we just talked about 6 different steps. Okay, so again, medical examiners perform autopsies that involve 6 different steps. The first one is the external examination. The second is creation of a Y incision. The third, removal of a brain. 4, examination of organs. And let's see. Can somebody get that for me? For the 5th step, it's going to be sent to a toxicologist. And then for the 6th step, the organs are returned to the body and the incisions are sewn closed. All right, so what does the word autopsy mean? And what is the main reason for performing an autopsy? Autopsy is the examination of the body of a dead person and is performed to determine the cause of death. So remember, forensic autopsies are performed to determine if death was an accident, homicide, suicide, or a natural event. Okay? And then what are the duties of a medical examiner? So a medical examiner may order an autopsy without the consent of the next of kin if death occurred under suspicious circumstances, such as an accidental death or death that occurred during medical procedure And then, what is a toxicologist? So, a toxicologist is actually a scientist who works with chemicals and other substances to determine if they are toxic or harmful to humans and other living organisms or the environment. Samples of tissue may be viewed under a microscope or sent to a toxicologist for further investigation into the cause of death, particularly if it is not evident from the initial observation. And then, what is a precedent? And what are other terms that are similar to this one that could be used in a medical examiner's office? So, death sentence is a term used in the law governing estates and trusts in reference to a person who has died. Decedents have rights that continue after their death and the authority to take certain actions or make certain decisions through third-party representatives. And then to add to that, what are other terms that are similar to this one that could be used in a medical examiner's office? Can you guys think of any other term? Deceased. Yeah, good job, Andy. So, yeah, I think that would probably be more of a common term, right? That's a term that everyone's familiar with. And so, yeah, good job. And then, what is the Y incision? So, what is the Y incision? Why is this the preferred way to perform an autopsy? So, the internal examination begins with the creation of a Y incision from both shoulders, joining over the sternum and continuing down the pubic bone. The skin and underlying tissues are separated to expose the rib cage and abdominal cavity. The organs of the thoracic and abdominal cavity are removed for further investigation. Okay? And so now we're going to consider the quote, states or local governments often appoint a forensic pathologist to the job of medical examiner. What is the difference between those two titles? So remember, a medical examiner is a doctor who specializes in forensic medicine, which is the application of medical knowledge in the investigation of crime. For this reason, medical examiners are also called forensic pathologists. In addition to examining the body, they can also use clues to determine how wounds were inflicted, such as those that occur from knives or bullets. A medical examiner can order an autopsy without the consent of the next of kin if death has occurred under suspicious circumstances such as an accidental death or death that occurred during medical procedures or operations. So it takes 13 years of education after high school to become a forensic pathologist. And remember, it takes a strong stomach because it can be a gruesome, smelly, and disgusting job. Forensic pathologists are required to testify in court about the findings. So that means that states or local governments appoint a forensic pathologist to the job of medical examiner. So guys, really what that means is that means that those two titles are one and the same and used interchangeably. Okay? So that means that forensic pathologist